You know you're not part of a family when an invitation feels like a summons from the prosecution. My name is Marissa Carter, Senior Software Architect at Architect Financial, and the invisible cog that keeps the prestigious Carter family machine running. At 35, I've perfected the art of existing without being seen, except when they need something fixed, secured, or silently managed. My Cambridge apartment is my sanctuary. Everything here obeys rules I've created. Color-coded calendars that never overlap, books aligned by height and subject, a home office secured by fingerprint authentication that would make government facilities envious. Control is my religion, and in these four walls, I am its high priestess. Outside this space, I'm the ghost who maintains the digital and financial infrastructure of the Carter dynasty. My father Douglas, mother Gretchen, and brother Miles. They summon me when systems fail. Investments need securing, or digital footprints require scrubbing. But at family gatherings, I'm the awkward afterthought, the emergency contact without the emotional connection. They need you, my grandmother Elise once told me before she passed. They just don't know how to want you. That distinction has shaped my adult life, being essential, yet expendable. Wednesday afternoon found me deep in debugging a security protocol when my phone buzzed. Mother's name appeared on the screen with a message that was pure Gretchen Carter. Brunch, Maison Jolie. Sunday, 11 a.m. Your presence expected. No, please. No, would you like to join us? Just a command delivered with the warmth of an automated system alert. Maison Jolie, that pretentious French bistro in Back Bay, where Boston's elite perform their weekly rituals of being photographed with overpriced omelets. This wasn't a brunch invitation, it was theater. With me cast in a role I hadn't agreed to play. I texted back a simple confirmed, then set my phone face down on my desk. That's when I remembered the irregularities I'd spotted during my routine system audit earlier that week. Miles's trust fund showed ATM withdrawals totaling $112,000 over just 3 months. The geolocation data from his phone placed him at Foxborough Casino during each withdrawal. And then there were the personal credit lines he'd opened under our family's investment shell company. Using what appeared to be a proxy signature that wouldn't trigger my security alerts. But most concerning was the $9,300 wire transfer to an LLC I didn't recognize. When I pulled the corporate records, the shell front tied to a known bookie. My brother wasn't just gambling, he was drowning. I was still processing this when another alert pinged my laptop. This one from the municipal record system I'd programmed to monitor any changes to Carter family properties. A renovation permit had been filed 2 weeks ago for our Lake Adelina cabin in Vermont. The cabin where my grandmother's private library lived. The same library she'd explicitly left to me in her will. The permit included demolition plans for that very room. My electronic signature was on the authorization form, a forgery. I immediately revoked the permit, but damage could already be underway. I closed my eyes and saw the library as it had been during my last visit. The first editions lining mahogany shelves, handwritten notes Elise had left tucked between pages meant only for me. When they silence you, speak through design, she'd told me once, showing me the secret room behind her study wall. This room is yours. It always will be. I made my decision then. Sunday's brunch wouldn't be the usual passive performance. I reached for my phone and texted my friend Danielle, a junior partner at a surveillance tech firm. I need eyes and ears inside Maison Jolie on Sunday. Can you help? Her response came instantly. What kind of trouble are you in? The family kind, I replied. Say no more. I can get an off-duty server to wear a discreet mic and cam pin during your brunch. With that arranged, I pulled 18 months of financial logs on every Carter account. The archived SMS between Douglas and Miles revealed a pattern. My father knew about Miles's losses but kept covering them to avoid PR fallout. I discovered a secret email account Miles had registered using a burner domain tied to sports betting forums. Every piece of leverage went into a secure cloud drive, encrypted with protocols of my own design. By Friday night, my preparations were complete. Outfit selected, a charcoal gray sheath dress, elegant but stern. Neutral deflections rehearsed for expected criticisms, non-essential data deleted from my phone. Make sure the server gets that lapel mic, I texted Danielle. And Danielle, get me a PI. Miles needs a tail. 72 hours. No breaks. That night, an image arrived in my encrypted inbox. Miles, dressed in gym clothes, exiting a nondescript warehouse in Providence, Rhode Island. In his hand was a manila envelope, stuffed full. Behind him stood a man I recognized from federal watch lists, a lone shark with connections to organized crime. Sunday's brunch suddenly felt less like an ambush and more like the beginning of a war I hadn't realized was already underway. They wanted the ghost in their machine. They were about to discover I had hands on every lever of their carefully constructed world. And I was done being silenced. When a family weaponizes brunch, every fork becomes a dagger. Sunday morning arrived with deceptive spring sunshine that did nothing to warm the cold calculation I'd been nursing all weekend. I drove my modest dark gray Audi A4 to Maison Jolie, parking it among the ostentatious fleet of Bentleys and Maseratis lined up for valet service. Each luxury vehicle represented another carefully curated piece of my family's social image. An image I helped maintain through digital smoke and mirrors while being systematically erased from it. I stepped into the restaurant at exactly 11 o'clock, the glassy, ornate dining room buzzing with Boston's elite pretending not to watch each other. My family was already seated at a prime visibility table. Of course they were. The waiter, whom I recognized as Danielle's surveillance contact, gave me a subtle nod as I approached. "Darling," my mother cooed, her voice dripping with the same artificial sweetness as the honey she was stirring into her tea. 15 minutes early is on time. I checked my watch. It's exactly 11, Mother. She smiled thinly, her ivory pearls gleaming at her throat like a row of perfect teeth. My father, Douglas, barely looked up from his phone, his navy-tailored suit as pristine as his public persona. Miles looked like hell. Pale skin, constantly fidgeting hands, checking his watch and phone in an endless nervous loop. "Sparkling water and black coffee, please," I told the waiter. Gretchen rolled her eyes. "Still so difficult. Would it kill you to have a mimosa like a normal person at brunch?" "I'm driving," I said simply. "Miles had 3 and he's driving," she countered, reaching over to squeeze my brother's arm affectionately. That explained his jitters, hangover mixed with whatever financial hole he was digging himself into. I maintained eye contact with the waiter a beat longer than necessary, making sure the recording devices were picking up every word. When the menus arrived, my mother managed to weaponize even that. "Avocado toast, Marissa? Really? So predictable." She turned to Miles, who had ordered steak and eggs. "Now that's a proper meal. You need your strength, darling." My father finally looked up from his phone. "How's the programming thing going?" The programming thing. 7 years building their entire financial infrastructure, and it was still the programming thing. "Actually, our team just launched a secure fintech platform that's been adopted by 3 major banks," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "We're expecting—" "Miles just closed the Westford corporate complex deal," Gretchen interrupted. $45 million. Imagine that. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The Westford deal had collapsed 3 weeks ago. I had seen the termination letter myself when balancing the quarterly projections. Another lie in their carefully constructed narrative. "Congratulations," I said to Miles, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. He cleared his throat. "By the way, sis, I might need a small change to my access level. just a temporary liquidity shift. There it was, the real reason for this family gathering. He's taking more interest in the family business, Gretchen said, beaming with maternal pride that never seemed to extend to me. You should be proud of your brother. I nodded slowly, saying nothing, watching every tick, every glance between them. My silence made them uncomfortable. I could see it in the way my mother's fingers tightened around her champagne flute, the way Miles started bouncing his knee under the table. Gretchen, never one to tolerate silence, announced loudly enough for neighboring tables to hear, "We expect you at the Vermont renovation reveal next month. All the right people will be there." I wasn't informed there was a reveal, I said, carefully setting down my coffee cup. Douglas shrugged, still half focused on his phone. Sentimentality aside, modernization is needed. That musty old library? Gretchen waved her hand dismissively. It's becoming Miles's media room. Surround sound, projection screen. He has such wonderful taste. My hands went cold. It was legally designated to me by Elise. Gretchen's laugh was like glass breaking. Elise was always too dramatic. Honestly, Marissa, it's not as if you use it. When was the last time you even visited the cabin? The last time had been 3 months after Elise died, when I'd gone to catalog every book, every note she'd left for me. I'd stayed up all night in that library, surrounded by the only family member who had ever truly seen me. Speaking of family gatherings, Gretchen continued, clearly eager to change the subject, Jennifer Grayson just got engaged again. Her third husband. And here you are. She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at my entire existence. Still waiting, she finished with false sympathy. Mother. Miles started, sensing danger. Perhaps independence suits you better, given your personality, she continued, her voice carrying just enough for the tables around us to hear. I noticed several people glancing our way, exchanging looks. This was part of her performance, public humiliation wrapped in concerned motherly clothing. I remained perfectly still, my expression neutral despite the rage building behind my ribs. I had anticipated this. It was textbook Gretchen, always finding ways to remind me that I was defective in her eyes, not quite Carter material, despite carrying the name. As plates were cleared, she leaned in, her tone syrupy and poisonous. You're lucky we even include you, Marissa. Pity goes a long way. Most families wouldn't try so hard. Miles chuckled awkwardly. Douglas remained glued to his phone, refusing to engage in the emotional blood sport his wife so enjoyed. I set down my cup, carefully aligned my napkin on the table, and smiled. Thank you for your honesty, Mother. The simple response seemed to throw her. She'd expected tears, or anger, or withdrawal, my usual reactions. Instead, I held her gaze steadily across the table. The silence between us grew, became oppressive, filled the expensive air between us like invisible smoke. Gretchen blinked first. The waiter returned with the check. Douglas paid with a platinum card connected to the system I built, and now silently controlled. I watched the transaction go through on the waiter's handheld device, thinking about how easy it would be to decline it, to create a small moment of embarrassment for them. Not yet, I reminded myself. Not here. As we exited the restaurant, Miles sidled up beside me, his voice low and urgent. Hey, can I borrow $5,000 just until Thursday? It's urgent. I didn't answer, instead reaching for my phone, which had just buzzed in my purse. It was an encrypted message from the PI. Warehouse location confirmed. Surveillance matches. Loan Shark's real name is Vincent Carrozza. FBI already watching him. Attached was a photo taken through a dirty window. Miles signing a contract. The ink a blood red against white paper. Marissa? Miles prompted, his voice tinged with desperation. About that money? I looked at my brother. this stranger wearing familiar features, and felt nothing but cold certainty. "I'll think about it," I said, knowing I would do no such thing. As I walked to my car, leaving them behind, I realized something had fundamentally changed. For years, I had been the ghost in their machine, maintaining their lifestyle while they pretended I barely existed. I had accepted my role out of some misguided sense of family duty, of belonging to something larger than myself. But family isn't just shared DNA. It's not automatic. It's earned through trust, respect, and love, none of which the Carters had shown me. They had betrayed me one too many times. The library, the forged signatures, Miles's gambling debts threatening to pull down the financial infrastructure I'd spent years building. It was time to stop being their ghost. It was time to become their reckoning. I started my car, the engine purring to life with comfortable predictability. Unlike my family, machines never lied. They operated according to rules, codes, and protocols, all of which I controlled. And control, as I was about to remind the Carter family, was everything. When you build the fortress, you know exactly where to place the explosives. I returned to my apartment after brunch with perfect clarity. The illusion of reconciliation, of ever being truly part of the Carter family, was over. The weight I'd carried for years suddenly felt lighter, replaced by a cold, precise focus I recognized from my most complex coding projects. I changed out of my brunch attire and into soft loungewear, but the shift was more than physical. The emotional armor I wore around my family came off. Operational armor went on. Sitting at my desk, I opened my laptop and initiated the encrypted admin dashboard I'd labeled simply Carter Family Infrastructure, a system I'd built over 7 years with one master access point: me. My fingers hovered over the keys as I whispered to myself, no more protecting them from themselves. First, I disabled automatic payments on 4 credit cards used by Gretchen and Douglas. 3 private cards tied to Miles, 2 of which he'd opened without proper authorization, and vendor accounts for multiple properties. Country club memberships, utilities, maintenance, all suspended. I removed overdraft protections on all checking accounts, setting them to bounce rather than cover. Then I enacted what I privately called red mode on the family's investment dashboard. This would force dual authentication for all trades, mandatory review periods, and biometric verification for large transfers. In essence, I was putting their financial life on lockdown. Next came my formal resignation as family financial administrator. I drafted the email with surgical precision, copying Douglas, Gretchen, Miles, their corporate attorney Preston Stein, and the internal compliance lead at Carter Hamilton Properties. The letter included a timeline of my involvement, summary of actions taken, reference to the breach of Elise Carter's will, and legal language outlining the transition clause I had pre-written into the original infrastructure contract years ago. I had always been careful, even when I thought I was part of something real. With the email sent, I scheduled an urgent consultation with Vanessa Hargrove, a specialist in family asset protection and trust litigation, whom I'd researched thoroughly after the first signs of trouble with the Vermont cabin. "You've been planning this for some time," Vanessa observed when we met the next morning, her office overlooking the Charles River. "I've been preparing for it," I corrected. "There's a difference." I handed her a drive containing full transaction logs, IP and login records, the audit trail of forged renovation permits, video and audio from Brunch via the mic'd server, and screenshots of Miles's wire transfers to Carotz's Shell LLC. Vanessa reviewed the evidence with the clinical efficiency I'd hoped for when selecting her. "Miles has clearly committed fraud," she confirmed, "and Gretchen and Douglas's actions violate trust terms and inheritance law. The Vermont renovation qualifies for emergency injunction." As we prepared documentation, Vanessa discovered something that even I had missed. This is a notarized form approving the cabin mortgage, she said, sliding a document across the table. Your signature is forged here. I stared at the signature. It was good, almost perfect, but the slight hesitation in the final stroke of my last name gave it away. This is felony-level forgery, Vanessa said, her voice taking on an edge of excitement. If we move now, we can freeze the mortgage before it finalizes. By afternoon, we had prepared an emergency court filing with evidence of the fraudulent mortgage, unauthorized demolition, misuse of trust funds, and forgery of legal documents. Back home at 11:30 that night, I sat at my command center with fresh coffee and laser focus. I locked down all administrator portals, updated encryption protocols across all family financial tools, created secure offline backups of all financial data and evidence, and notified the county permitting office of the pending legal dispute over the Lake Adelina property. The final step: scheduling withdrawal of my power of attorney permissions from any family-linked accounts. I hesitated just briefly before confirming the action. In that moment, a memory surfaced. Elise showing me the blueprint of the hidden library, her soft voice gentle but firm. They'll try to erase you, she had said. Make sure they never succeed quietly. For the first time, I was acting in protection of myself, not just in reaction to them. The grief I felt wasn't accompanied by guilt. It was mourning for a family that had never really existed, except in my hopes. Vanessa filed the injunction first thing the next morning. Copies were sent to the contractors, local building inspection board, Carter family's attorney, and state financial oversight board. Simultaneously, I logged out of all shared accounts and shut down the Carter command center I'd built from scratch. It was 3 in the morning when my secure phone buzzed. Danielle's voice came through, breathless and urgent. You're not the only one watching Miles. The feds are about to move on Vincent Carrozza. If Miles is tied to him, this could go nuclear, for all of them. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker beyond my window. How long do they have? Days, maybe less. Carrozza's under investigation for money laundering through his gambling operations. The FBI has been building a case for months. Does Miles know? If he doesn't, he's the only one in Carrozza's circle who doesn't. After ending the call, I stood at my window, watching the pre-dawn stillness. In my reflection on the glass, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. I looked like Elise. Not in the fine details of features, but in the resolute set of my jaw, the clear-eyed determination. I thought about the library at Lake Adelina, about Elise's books and notes waiting behind that hidden panel. I thought about Miles signing contracts with criminals, about my parents dismissing my existence with casual cruelty, about my signature forged on documents I would never have approved. They had counted on my silence, my compliance, my desperate need to belong somewhere. They had calculated that I would continue to be their infrastructure without ever becoming truly structural, an expendable support system they could discard once it ceased to be useful. But they had failed to account for one critical variable. I had designed their entire world. I knew every access point, every password, every digital and financial lever that kept the Carter empire running smoothly. I had built their fortress. And when you build the fortress, you know exactly where to place the explosives. The next morning, I received 19 missed calls from my mother, 3 from my father, and an increasingly desperate series of texts from Miles. I routed them all to Vanessa's office with a new auto-reply. All communications regarding Carter family matters are now handled through legal counsel. Please contact Vanessa Hargrove at the number below. Then I went to work at Archintech as if it were any normal day. Because for the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first. And it felt like freedom. As I coded that day, I kept one eye on the family accounts through a secure monitoring portal. By noon, the first financial domino had fallen. Gretchen's country club payment had failed. By 3 o'clock, Miles's secret credit card was in collections. And by 5, I received word that my father's scheduled donation to a live charity event had been declined on stage. The Carter family's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack, and I, their invisible architect, was the only one who knew just how deep those cracks would go. They expected me to fall apart. Instead, I pulled the pin on their fantasy world. By Monday morning, the fallout was spreading faster than even I had anticipated. Gretchen's country club membership was suspended after her auto payment failed. Miles's secret credit cards triggered immediate collections calls that lit up his phone like a Christmas tree. But the crown jewel of consequences came when Douglas's scheduled donation to a live charity event, a carefully orchestrated photo opportunity for Carter Hamilton's public image, was declined on stage, the check bouncing in front of Boston's philanthropic elite. My mother called me 19 times before noon. I listened to none of the voicemails, instead routing all communications to Vanessa as planned. Let her earn her considerable hourly rate. Word traveled quickly through the rarefied air of Boston's upper crust. By Tuesday, whispers circulated that Gretchen Carter couldn't cover her own dues. A colleague texted me that Miles had been spotted having a heated argument at a cash advance kiosk downtown. Carter Hamilton's stock dipped 8% overnight as rumors of internal dysfunction began to leak. A gossip columnist for Boston's social pages published a blind item about a tech-savvy daughter withdrawing from the dynasty, which made me smile despite myself. I had never been considered part of their dynasty before. Funny how my absence suddenly made me visible. Douglas's direct call came Wednesday afternoon. I answered on speaker and hit record. "Marissa," he began, his voice attempting the calm, reasonable tone he used in board meetings. "Let's fix this quietly. There's no need for public embarrassment." "Interesting opening," I replied. Not, "How are you?" or, "We've been worried about you." He sighed. "You know how your mother gets. This situation is complicated." "Which part? Miles gambling away trust funds, the forged documents, or demolishing Grandma Elise's library that was legally left to me?" A pause. "I knew about Miles's accounts," he admitted. "I hoped you would contain the damage. I'm not your janitor, Dad. I was your infrastructure, and you broke it." After I hung up, Miles's texts flooded in. "You've destroyed everything. You have no idea who you're messing with. They'll come after you. You know that, right?" Vanessa called to warn me that his tone bordered on legally actionable intimidation. That night, Miles was caught on CCTV at a downtown bar throwing a punch at a man who mentioned gambling debts. The spiral was accelerating. The mortgage company involved with the Vermont cabin received our notice of criminal investigation the next morning. Vanessa subpoenaed the broker, and the documents showed Miles had forged my signature on multiple cabin-related forms. Gretchen tried damage control, sending a statement to press contacts. Family misunderstanding during a renovation. All sorted. But Vanessa was better at this game. She counter-released our legal filings to a select journalist contact, exposing evidence of financial abuse, inheritance violation, and ongoing fraud investigations. By Friday, Carter Hamilton's real estate division was flagged for audit by the State Department of Financial Institutions. Douglas's longtime CFO resigned, citing ethical misalignment in his public statement. I received a message from an anonymous insider at the company. "Internal audit will happen in 10 days. They're going to blame you for every missing dollar." Let them try. My paper trail was impeccable. Amid the chaos, I found myself thriving. Architect promoted me to Director of Infrastructure Security. Ironically, the same week I'd dismantled the infrastructure I'd built for my family. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while managing Carter affairs. I even began therapy with Drs. Elena Shaw, focusing on the generational emotional abuse that had shaped my relationship with my family. Gretchen's emotionally manipulative emails continued. I always tried my best. You were just too complicated to love. Why are you trying to destroy us? I no longer responded. Those guilt triggers had lost their power. Instead, I channeled my energy into closing every loophole, securing my future. I closed old family-linked bank accounts still in my name. Opened new accounts with private institutions under LLC protections. Installed secure home surveillance systems on Vanessa's recommendation. Began outlining my own company vision. A cybersecurity firm for high-net-worth individuals abused by families or spouses. On Saturday night, I was reviewing security protocols when a notification pinged my phone. A video had leaked on Reddit, a recording from a Carter Hamilton team meeting where Douglas screamed at staff, blaming me for the audit chaos. She's sabotaging everything we've built. Find me every system she ever touched. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But what froze my blood was in the comments. A cryptic user had posted a file tree screenshot labeled Carter Financial Top Backup V3. I recognized the layout immediately. It was mine. Someone had accessed my encrypted backups, or at least wanted me to think they had. Either possibility was dangerous. I initiated a full security lockdown on all my personal servers and called Vanessa and Danielle. I need everything we have, ready to deploy, I told Vanessa. Someone's trying to flip the script. To Danielle, find out who posted that screenshot and get me everything you have on Douglas's tech team. As I waited for their responses, I pulled up my grandmother's last email to me, sent 3 days before she died. Remember, my dear, they only have the power you give them. And when that power is gone, they'll do anything to get it back. Be ready. Elise had known this day would come. She'd been preparing me all along. I opened my laptop and began coding a new security protocol, one designed not to protect, but to reveal. If someone was accessing my backups, they'd find exactly what I wanted them to find. The Carters had taught me one valuable lesson. In their world, information was currency, and I was about to make myself very, very rich. They tried to erase me. Now I'm writing the ending, and every pen stroke cuts. Let's lay everything out, Vanessa said, gesturing to the large conference table in her office. It was Monday morning, and I'd barely slept since discovering the Reddit post. I methodically arranged the complete digital dossier before her. Miles's gambling transactions, video and audio from Brunch, forged mortgage documents, emails proving knowledge and complicity from Douglas and Gretchen, IP logs showing Miles accessing restricted investment dashboards from unregistered devices. And this, I said, sliding across the final piece, a newly surfaced memo Danielle's contact had extracted from Carter Hamilton's internal servers. Douglas planned to shift Elise Carter's designated inheritance into a company-owned asset, effectively nullifying my claim to the cabin. Vanessa studied it, her expression hardening. This is beyond family dysfunction. This is calculated financial abuse. It's what they do, I replied, what they've always done. Vanessa nodded, then outlined our counter-strategy. We're drafting an offer to their legal team, intentionally aggressive. You agree to sell your share of the Vermont property at 30% above market value. They sign a legal statement acknowledging past breaches of trust and fraud attempts. Miles and Douglas must withdraw all legal claims against you and cease contact. A legally binding no-access clause to your tech IP and financial systems. And if they refuse? Her smile was sharp as a blade. Failure to accept within 5 days equals full lawsuit, asset freeze, and public litigation. The works. I expected the Carters to retreat, regroup, perhaps even negotiate. What I didn't expect was Douglas arranging a secret off-record meeting at his office the very next day. I came alone, he said as I walked in, gesturing to the empty chairs around his mahogany desk. This is between us. He started with charm, reminiscing about teaching me to ride a bike, praising my technical skills. When that didn't soften my expression, he pivoted to guilt. Your mother hasn't slept in days. Is that what you wanted? When I remained silent, he shifted into threat mode, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. If you take this public, I will ruin you. I built everything you ever touched. I met his gaze, feeling oddly calm. You built nothing I didn't secure, protect, and upgrade. His face flushed red. You ungrateful. I'm recording this conversation, Dad, I interrupted, tapping the voice recorder watch Vanessa had given me. Every threat, every admission. He fell silent, recalculating. I stood to leave. Vanessa will be in touch with your legal team. The family split exactly as Vanessa predicted. Miles, now desperate, called her personally the following day, offering a partial confession in exchange for immunity. He admitted to forging the Vermont signature and siphoning nearly $220,000 in losses over 2 years. Most damning of all, he blamed Douglas and Gretchen for enabling him and setting him up to fail. Vanessa proposed a limited cooperation agreement, ensuring Miles's admissions were documented and usable against the others. He signed that afternoon. The public unraveling began when an investigative journalist from the Boston Herald published a feature titled Dynasty in Collapse: Inside the Carter Family's Digital Meltdown. The article featured anonymous interviews, leaked financial statements, and legal filings, accompanied by a voicemail of Douglas blaming Gretchen for letting the tech witch off the leash. That phrase, tech witch, became my unofficial title in certain circles. I decided I liked it. Gretchen's final attempt at emotional manipulation came in an email with the subject line, "What have you done?" The body read, "Your grandmother would be ashamed of this cruelty. Families survive storms by staying together. You've chosen destruction." I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the email, tacked it on my wall, and wrote over it in red marker, "No, you chose this when you made me invisible." When the settlement deadline arrived, the Carter family rejected our offer. Vanessa, as promised, filed full litigation, fraud, breach of fiduciary responsibility, forgery, emotional and financial abuse. A judge approved the motion for pre-trial asset freeze on select Carter Hamilton accounts. The final blow came from within. Douglas's assistant, under pressure from investigators, leaked emails showing plans to transfer assets offshore before the audit. The SEC opened an investigation. The IRS launched a separate inquiry. Gretchen's name disappeared from 2 foundation boards overnight. Miles was officially served a criminal subpoena related to the Carrozza connection. I was in a meeting at Archintech when Vanessa called. "You need to come to my office, now." 20 minutes later, I stared at the documents spread across her desk, papers delivered anonymously from a whistleblower inside Carter Hamilton. "These are the original documents showing Elise Carter's intentions for the Lake Adelina property," Vanessa explained. "She meant for you to inherit it in full, not partial. The will was modified after her death, signed under suspicious circumstances." I traced my grandmother's handwriting with my fingertip. "They altered her will?" "Yes, and that's criminal fraud." I sat back, processing the implications. Not content with erasing me from the family, they had tried to erase me from Elise's legacy as well. The one person who had truly seen me, who had tried to protect me even after her death. "What do we do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We go nuclear," Vanessa replied. "Full criminal investigation into Douglas and the estate manager who signed off on the change." That night, I dreamed of Elise's library, not as it had been, but as it would be once I reclaimed it. Books restored to their proper places, her notes preserved, the space honored as she intended. In the dream, she sat in her favorite armchair, smiling at me. "You found your voice," she said. I woke with tears on my face but strength in my heart. For years, I had been the ghost in their machine, the invisible support system they took for granted. Now, I was becoming something else entirely, the architect of their reckoning. As dawn broke, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Carter Hamilton stocks plummet amid fraud allegations. Attached was a photo of Douglas leaving the SEC building, his face ashen, refusing to answer reporters' questions. I closed the alert and opened my email to find a message from Dr. Shaw confirming our next therapy appointment. The subject line read, "Moving forward, not looking back." That felt right. The Carters had spent years trying to define me by their standards, to mold me into their accessory. But I was done being molded by hands that never bothered to understand what they were shaping. I was Marissa Carter. And for the first time, that name belonged only to me. They burned my bridge. I paved a runway in the ashes. Vanessa moved with the precision of a surgeon, filing a new case challenging the posthumous modification of Elise's will and calling for criminal investigation into Douglas and the estate manager who signed off on the change. The court froze all development on the Vermont cabin pending the outcome. Contractors pulled out. PR for Carter Hamilton plummeted further. Investors backed away like they were fleeing a contagious disease. Miles, spiraling and cornered, became the first to fully break. He publicly confessed to addiction and manipulation, submitting an open apology letter to me that was clearly ghostwritten by his lawyer but required by the court. He entered a formal rehab program, finally addressing the demons he'd been feeding with borrowed money and borrowed time. I didn't contact him, but I did allow Vanessa to negotiate a lenient settlement, on the condition that he remain cut off from all trust access for 5 years. Sometimes recovery requires financial sobriety as much as physical sobriety. "You're showing him more mercy than he showed you," Vanessa remarked when I agreed to the terms. "I'm not doing it for him," I replied. "I'm doing it for me. I don't want vengeance. I want peace." Gretchen's social death was perhaps the most fitting consequence for a woman who had weaponized social standing against me for decades. She was ousted from every major circle that had once defined her identity. Her favorite charity blacklisted her after discovering her involvement in the will tampering. Old friends stopped responding to invitations. Her carefully cultivated image became synonymous with toxic matriarch in Boston's elite gossip networks. She attempted to reframe herself as the victim via a staged interview in a lifestyle magazine, but Vanessa's team caught wind of it. The article was pulled last minute after my legal team warned the publication that litigation for defamation would follow. Douglas's downfall was more formal, but no less complete. He was indicted on tax fraud, financial misrepresentation to investors, and forgery. He pleaded no contest to avoid full prison time, stepped down as CEO, and was replaced by an interim board. Carter Hamilton, the empire he'd built and lorded over me my entire life, was sold in parts to avoid bankruptcy. In June, the court ruled that I was the sole legal heir to the Lake Adelina cabin based on Elise's original will. Douglas was ordered to pay back losses from renovation damage. I visited the property for the first time since the battle began on a clear summer morning, driving up the winding road with a strange mixture of grief and triumph swirling in my chest. The library remained intact, dusty and untouched, as if waiting for me to return. I ran my hand over Elise's inscription carved into the desk, "For the granddaughter they will never deserve." She had known all along what I was only now understanding. Family isn't determined by DNA. It's built through love, respect, and protection, none of which the Carters had offered me. With the legal settlements and compensation from the lawsuit, I launched a boutique cybersecurity firm specializing in protecting women and marginalized heirs from financial abuse. My clients included the silent victims of high-profile families and legacy wealth, people whose stories echoed my own. My first-year client list included a daughter of a Fortune 500 CEO and a widow from a billionaire tech founder, both trying to extricate themselves from golden handcuffs. "You've turned your trauma into purpose," Dr. Shaw observed during our final therapy session. I nodded. "I still grieve the family I wanted to have." "But?" she prompted. "But I no longer blame myself for their absence." She smiled. "You didn't lose them. You simply stopped being lost in them." That autumn, I held a small gathering at the cabin. Danielle, Vanessa, and a few close friends who had stood by me through the storm. We sat around the dock at sunset, drinking wine and sharing stories that had nothing to do with the Carters or their downfall. As twilight settled over the water, I excused myself and went to the library. During renovations, I discovered a hidden floorboard containing Elise's final handwritten letter. I brought it out to the dock and read it aloud to my chosen family. "The strongest trees are not the tallest, but those that survive every season. You, my dear, are a forest." A week later, Gretchen sent one last letter via her lawyer, a flat apology offering to meet and reconcile. I read it once, then burned it in the fireplace at the cabin. "I forgive you," I said aloud to the flames, "but you don't get to come back." Standing at the edge of the lake that evening, I watched the sun setting behind distant mountains, feeling the autumn wind blowing through the open windows of the library behind me. On my laptop was a new project, my own memoir, something I had started writing not for vengeance, but for healing, included by pity, excluded by choice. The title was a reference to Gretchen's words at that fateful brunch, but the story wasn't about her. It wasn't about any of them. It was about the woman who had built herself from the code up, who had discovered that family could be chosen rather than inherited, who had learned that sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away. I had spent years maintaining their systems, preserving their facades, protecting them from their own worst impulses. I had been the ghost in their machine, always needed, rarely acknowledged. Now I was simply Marissa, no longer a Carter by anything but name. I was the architect of my own life, the builder of my own foundations, the programmer of my own future. And for the first time, I was free to write my own code.